Hello, Dr. Walker. Welcome to the presentation of my supervisory contract. I elected to divide my contract into 9 sections, starting with purpose, goals, and objectives of supervision, moving on to context and content of supervision, frequency, availability, what to do in emergencies, how to handle compensation for supervision, duration and termination of the time we work together, standards, and finally, the process of supervision. The purpose section of the contract is fairly straightforward and addresses goals and objectives for supervision. In the section on context and content, you'll note that I'm very specific about my private practice novel therapy being the context of supervision. This is because my intention is to have all of my supervisees actually work within my own practice. In your feedback from my rough draft, you asked me how many sites my associates could have. I'll go ahead and address that now. At the present time, I'm not really interested in supervising individuals that are working outside the context of my own practice. I know they are able to. I know they are able to have multiple sites, but at present, I'm going to go ahead and restrict my supervision to individuals who are employed by my own practice. The content portion of the contract is fairly boilerplate for counselors and covers the scope of supervision as well as records being kept and the kind of feedback that will be provided at the close of each session. You'll note that I've made your requested change such that supervision notes may be shared with supervisee at the supervisee's request. In the section titled Frequency, the contract goes over how often supervisees will come in for supervision. Although it's my preference to do supervision in person, I've made a change based on your feedback, Dr. Walker, to include the caveat that if circumstances prohibit in-person meetings, that we can make arrangements otherwise. I also set the preference for supervision to be individual in the beginning. You asked in your feedback if I was planning on offering triadic supervision. Although I do love group supervision, I see a lot of benefit to students hearing the supervision and feedback of their peers. It is my intention to start off with truly individual one-on-one supervision for new supervisees. That was a foundational time of learning for me, and I want to be able to pay forward that benefit to my own supervisees. Another section I made amendments to is the one on availability. I did add in that supervisees will be using Simple Practice to book appointments 1 month at a time. Because it's my intention to have all my supervisees work within my practice, they will have full access to that platform and will have the ease and simplicity of booking their appointments ahead of time so we can make sure that that schedule is set aside for them. Of all the sections in the contract, emergencies was the one that I spent the most time on. I actually consulted an attorney to look over this section. I wanted to make sure I kept a fine balance between being not detailed enough or possibly being too detailed. I'm very cognizant of what it is to have a contract show up in a court of law, and I want to make sure I'm being very particular in my language. In light of this, I added the sentence, "This will be addressed in detail at orientation," to several places in the contract in general, but specifically in the emergencies subsection. I do want to make sure I'm giving due diligence to training my supervisees on how to handle emergencies, when to reach out to me, when to contact authorities, but I believe it is better placed in orientation materials rather than an official contract. The section on compensation, duration, and standards is also fairly boilerplate. However, I did make the change to standards to include the Code of Ethics for the American Counseling Association, and I left out the details on the TCA as you suggested. And this brings us to the final subsection of my contract, the process of supervision. I elected to include this section because I think it is critical to include very clear expectations for new supervisees. I want my supervisees to know clearly what they can expect from me, what my end of the bargain is going to be, but also what their side of the agreement is and how I expect them to prepare for their supervisory sessions. To wrap up this overview of my supervisory contract, Dr. Walker, you had some questions for me. Your first question was on technology. You asked if I will be requiring technology training now that technology limits are gone. We will go over technology in orientation, and in the first month of my supervisees practice with me, they'll be learning all of the communication platforms available through Simple Practice. I handle all of my technology needs through this product, so they will be able to do telehealth, email, and messaging through that platform. Your second question revolved around duration of supervision. You asked if I would be okay with supervisees taking 5 years to finish their supervision. My answer to that is absolutely. As I mentioned in my previous video, I'm the mom of a special needs child, and I was one of those supervisees that took 5 years to finish collecting those hours due to our special circumstances. And again, I want to be able to pay that forward to my own supervisees if they need it. And this takes us to your final question, Dr. Walker. If the LPC associate misses 3 supervisions, will I do a marathon 4th supervision so they get in their hours? I love that question. I do want to be as flexible as I can possibly be with supervisees without enabling any bad habits from them. That being said, I think it's highly unlikely that I would be able to carve out enough time to make up that much supervision there at the very tail end of the month. Instead, in orientation, we will be going over how to reschedule supervisory appointments ASAP after one is missed so that we don't run into this problem. Otherwise, when we hit that 2 absence mark, we're looking to the end of the month, we're going to have to come up with an individualized plan to help that student make up their time. Dr. Walker, I want to take this moment to thank you again for all the time and consideration you've put into your online training. It has been an absolute pleasure to work with you throughout this process. You have provided precisely what I needed to get started as a supervisor, and I want you to know how much I appreciate your willingness to shape and train this next generation of supervisors. Thanks so much for all of your help.